All right, so for the final part of this talk, I want to talk about regenerative agriculture. So why is regenerative agriculture important? Well, as we've previously discussed, through continuous tillage and monoculture crop production and set stock grazing practices that we've not yet discussed, these degrade soil ecosystems and result in less nutrition and food and contribute to poor human health. And so regenerative agriculture provides a viable alternative to this type of food production that has the potential to benefit human health as well. So, if you look at this picture here, this is a classic example of tillage and how much farmers till. And you can see at the top right-hand side of the screen how this guy's, tilled essentially everything but his driveway. So what is regenerative agriculture? Well, it's a system that focuses on regenerating soil health rather than degrading soil health. And so this means that vibrant soil biology and the relationship between plants and microorganisms is paramount to successful growing. And as a result, chemical inputs that destroy microbial life are avoided, not always entirely eliminated, but avoided if possible. So that's herbicides, pesticides, fungicides, insecticides, synthetic fertilizers, etc. So, and instead, the focus is on stewarding the natural symbiosis between plants and microbes to grow healthy plants and animals, including humans, with functional immune systems that are largely resistant to pests and disease. So how does regenerative agriculture work? Well, the farm is treated like an ecosystem and natural systems are mimicked. So the soil is never left bare. And so this is through no-till cover crop, or no-till crop production and diverse cover crops. Animals are integrated like in a natural system, particularly cattle. Natural selection is often used for breeding stock. So rather than propping up weak animals with inputs like vaccinations and antibiotics, weak animals are sold, and breeding stock is retained only from those animals that don't require any of those inputs. Soil biology and diversity are encouraged, and understanding historical ecological context is also important. So, not making an attempt, to grow oranges in Minnesota, for instance. So what is the historical ecological context of the area in which the farm resides, and trying to keep that in mind when setting up a farm system. And so these are guys that are no-till planting into standing cover crops. It can be done on tremendous scale like this. This guy's no-till planting right into a standing winter cover crop. Sometimes a roller crimper is used to terminate it. Sometimes it's just allowed to terminate on its own. And what that does is that provides a mat on the surface for like a mulch. So when the crop comes up, the cash crop comes up, water is retained. There's no bare soil. That all that residue is available for microbes to digest and then make the nutrients in their plant available to the growing cash crop. And so one of the reasons this is really important is that bare soil can have tremendously high soil temperatures. On the right there, you can see a surface temp of 133 degrees bare soil. This is when the air temp was 76 outside, and up to 100 degrees, even an inch deep. And so, at 100 degrees, a lot of moisture is lost through evaporation and even transpiration through the plant. And at around 110 degrees, many bacterial species start dying. And 133 degrees there, where that top right photo is, essentially all bacteria is dead there. If you look on the left-hand side where the ground is covered, same ambient temp, 76 degrees, surface temp is 77, the soil temp is 74, 1 inch below the surface. And so when the proper biology is in place, the effects are not linear, they're exponential and can result in actually disease suppressive soils. And so this is just demonstrating how, diversity of plants and diversity of soil microorganisms exerts not a linear, but a exponential or even logarithmic type effect on plant growth. And so you can see here that plant biomass means the amount of plant material that is grown increases exponentially up to about 15 species growing together. And this is because each species cultivates a different plant microbiome, and they all interact with each other. And same thing here, you can see on the left single species plantings and the amount of dry matter, and on the right cocktail mixes with multiple species cover crops and how much dry matter was produced, how much plant growth. And so you can end up with grass, forages that look like this, cover crops, and pasture forage that looks like this, which is similar to what European explorers first described when they came to North America. They would describe being on horseback and having the grass be at their waist. And so truly healthy soil biology can eliminate the need for outside inputs and can provide plants and animals with all the nutrition they need, and can actually change the pH within the rhizosphere. So these bacteria and fungi continuously exude acids and bases to change the pH and solubilize nutrients as the plant requires. And this is all in exchange for plant root exudates, essentially. And on the top hand right there, you can see an earthworm. We've known this since 1935. Earthworms have calciferous glands and can actually lime the soil. They produce calcium carbonate and excrete it in their worm castings. And so disease suppressive soils and healthy plants lie in an electron-proton balance, in which the oxidized state is disease susceptible while the reduced state is disease suppressive. And so things that have an oxidizing effect are like tillage, salt, synthetic fertilizers, nitrates, etc. Things that have a reducing effect are moist soils and plant species, specific plant species, and root exudates from plants with functional immune systems. And plants absorb and utilize elements best in their reduced states. And so that's another reason why tillage is so detrimental to plant growth, is because as all that oxygen is being infused into the system, it's oxidizing everything. And but plants really want to absorb nutrients in their reduced states best. And so this PEPH, the electron-proton balance homeostasis in the rhizosphere, is dynamic, but is the result of multiple interactions between the root system and microorganisms, and can result in disease-resistant plants. And so this is just a plant health pyramid that a guy named John Kempf has created, just demonstrating that as plants, are in a healthy, functional soil environment, they can undergo complete photosynthesis and then complete protein synthesis, and then when they're able to exist in an environment like this, similar to us, they can be so efficient that they can actually store excess, lipids. They can store fat just the way we do, and then eventually they can have extremely healthy immune system and can be largely resistant to pests and disease. And so many plant secondary metabolites, which are also known as phytochemicals, demonstrate antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and chemoprotective effects in mouse models and human epidemiology studies. These are things like resveratrol, carotenoids, etc. But these plant secondary metabolites are often only produced when a plant is healthy enough to produce them, because the plant's primary goal is just growth, period. And so on the left-hand side of the screen here, you can see that the primary metabolites are just things directly involved with growth, carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, nucleic acids. Only when plants are healthy do they produce these secondary compounds that can have beneficial effects, both for their immune systems, keeping them healthy, and for the animals that ingest them. So livestock integration is also very important for regenerative agriculture. And this is but the way that animals are grazed within the system is very important. So this is Alan Savory, and he was essentially the first guy to sort of recognize how important grazing management was. So he was a provincial game officer for the government of Rhodesia in Africa in the 1950s and 60s, and he thought that the landscape was becoming degraded. And other ecologists did as well. And so he thought there were too many animals, and it was resulting in overgrazing and overbrowsing. And so he advocated for the slaughter of up to 40,000 elephants. To his surprise, the land actually got worse, not better, with fewer elephants. So this led him to quit his job and begin studying how animals and grazing affect grassland ecosystems. And so he visited numerous grassland ecosystems around the world and observed the opposite of what he and other biologists believed to be true. And so he saw very healthy grasslands with tremendous numbers of animals on them. And so when he began to study this, what he realized that it's not the number of animals, it's the way in which they're managed. And so this is the Serengeti plain. And so the animals are in densities like this all the time, but they're continuously moving, and they have an annual pilgrimage around the park, around the Serengeti plain. And so he observed that grasslands can sustain tremendous animal density and grazing pressure. But the key is duration of impact and the length of the rest period. So here the animals are continuously moving due to pressure from predators, and also looking for unspoiled forage. When they're in that density, there's going to be dung and urine all over the forage. So they want to continuously move forward to unspoiled forage. So the same thing occurred here in the United States. In the Pleistocene era, the Ice Age, outside of where we were glaciated, we had tremendous number of ungulate animals grazing and moving. And then into the Holocene, we had the American bison doing the same thing. So went from extremely large bison to smaller bison, but the bison were there the entire time. And so they did the same thing that they did in the Serengeti plain. They migrated north to south throughout the year, looking for salt licks and watering holes and river crossings. And so it's estimates there are bison herds up to 1 million animals on the Great Plains. Herds in the eastern United States were not as dense, but were thought to be in the dozens to hundreds. And again, they were constantly moving. There was a tremendous animal impact, but it was over a short duration time with long rest interval. And so, why are cattle important in a regenerative farming practice? Well, these ecosystems evolved with herds of grazing and browsing ruminant animals. And so to remove them changes the entire dynamic of how the system is supposed to function. When animals, particularly cattle, are introduced, it can help increase organic or soil organic matter up to 1% annually, which is much quicker than forest or annual crops can. And in some areas, complete restoration of the O&A horizon can only occur with grazing livestock. And so again, the management is important. Continuous grazing or set stock grazing results in short plant height and can result in high soil temperatures, less carbon sequestration, less plant diversity, and then as a result, less soil microbial diversity. But heavy impact of short duration and long rest periods allow the plants adequate time for recovery after grazing. And plant rest and recovery results in longer root systems, more diverse plant species, and greater soil organic matter and carbon sequestration. And so the trampling of hooves and the concentrated deposition of dung and urine stimulates the latent seed bank to germinate and results in diverse pastures. And the shedding of microorganisms from the mouth, skin, and GI tract of the animals kickstarts the system. The very act of biting a leaf blade stimulates the plant to transfer sugar into the soil for the microbes in exchange for nutrients. So rather than feeding hay in regenerative grazing systems, animals graze stockpile forage or cover crops in the winter. And so these are photos of what Alan Savory demonstrated by introducing animals and increasing their stock density, but moving them. He was able to take desertified areas and bring them back into green grasslands. And so he's got numerous examples of these. And so one of the reasons why that is when the animals are moved regularly, it results in more diverse forage sward in the pasture. And you can see here how that can benefit the overall system when you look at the root depths. So they're extracting nutrients. Some of these plants are extracting nutrients up to 15 feet deep. And if you look over on the left at a lawn grass, you can see how how short plant height results in short root depth. And you can see why, golf courses need to be watered every day. If they don't get watered every day, their roots aren't deep enough to extract moisture from deep in the soil profile. And so this is just a graphical representation demonstrating how important integrating livestock into a regenerative system is. So you can see here that increase in soil organic matter through regenerative system using no-till and cover crops did increase, but dramatically increased once livestock were introduced. And these are soil cores up to 3 feet in depth from various farming systems. So on the far right is cropland, and you can compare that to the rotational grazing, and you see how just dark and how much carbon and soil organic matter is present in a rotational grazing system. You can compare it to a continuous grazing system. It's obviously better. And the same thing with hayland. You can see that the topsoil horizon, even in hayland, is nowhere near as deep as in a rotational grazing system. And so when pastures are managed as natural ecosystems, plant diversity increases. And these diverse pastures contain plants with inherent medicinal qualities, those secondary metabolites I mentioned. So animals don't need vaccinations, dewormers, antibiotics. Again, this is assuming properly selected genetics. And given the opportunity, animals will selectively eat between 50 to 75 plants daily. And so several of these phytochemicals that are found in plants are found in quantities in grass-fed meat and milk comparable to those found in plant foods. And these can have anti-inflammatory, anti-carcinogenic, and cardioprotective effects in humans, and can also lead to decreased postprandial inflammation, blood glucose, and cortisol levels. And so regenerative farms also produce crops with higher levels of certain vitamins, minerals, and phytochemicals, like I just mentioned. So, regeneratively grazed beef and pork has healthier fatty acid profiles, higher levels of omega-3 fats, and a more beneficial ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fats. And so going back to the epigenetic portion of the talk, DNA methyltransferases, which put those methyl groups on genes, shutting them on and off, are highly susceptible to nutrient availability and are influenced by gut microbial metabolism as well. So, regenerative agriculture, though, is not just for corn, soybean farms or cattle farms. Here's regenerative regenerative vineyards. On the left, they've got a diverse cover crop with crimson clover, and on the right, they're integrating sheep into it in the off season. Regenerative orchard on the left, cover crops in between the trees. No-till pumpkins on the right. And another thing that is done is chickens will be on pasture and they will follow the cattle. So as the cattle trample the grass down, they make the grass short enough for chickens to roam, and the chickens will scratch through the manure pats and eat the fly larvae and other insects that are pests to the cattle. So a symbiotic relationship there, but a diversification of revenue stream for the farm. And so, this is all fine and dandy as far as the, how regenerative agriculture can benefit the environment and benefit human health, but does it benefit the farmers? Does the farmer make any more money? And the answer is almost always yes. And so this is a study where, regenerative grazing increased the profitability or increases the profitability to the farmer by just increasing carrying capacity. They can carry more animals. It also diversifies operations on crop farms. And so, this particular study, while the regenerative fields had a slightly lower yield, they had 78% higher profits over traditional corn production systems. And profit was positively correlated in this study with the particular organic matter of the soil, not yield. But often regenerative farms don't have a decrease in yield. They can have similar equivalent yields to traditional farms, but are dramatically more profitable. And then this is a demonstration of corn pest abundance in a conventional versus regenerative system. And you can see how fewer pests there are in the regenerative system. And so in this particular author's study, his regenerative systems actually had an increase in yields compared to conventional and even organic, and always more profitable. And when he looked at his data, the production didn't correlate with the plant growth, didn't correlate with nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, or even soil organic matter. What the plant growth most correlated with was the fungal to bacterial ratio. So the more fungi that were present in his regenerative system, the greater plant growth. And so that's why, not tilling up that mycorrhizal fungi network is so important. You can see how he was outperforming Miracle-Gro just based on the fungal bacterial ratio in his soil. And so you can see here that, roots with and without mycorrhizal fungi. And so plant roots should look like that on the left in a regenerative. They should look like that, period. But in a regenerative system, particularly, coated with particles, from fungi and bacteria. And so, again, to demonstrate the fungal to bacterial ratio, most of our farms, due to tillage, have a tremendously oxidized environment, which favors bacterial growth and are mostly bacterial, which is where weeds want to grow. But row crops and late successional grasses really want to be in a 1-to-1 fungal to bacterial ratio, which is where we want to be. All right, so in conclusion, a healthy and diverse human microbiome is associated with a vigorous and appropriate immune response and overall human health. Soil health and human health are inextricably linked. We have a shared microbiome that is transgenerational. Healthy soils allow plants to produce secondary metabolites, phytochemicals that provide benefits to the plants and the animals that consume them. The epigenome is a very powerful entity and is affected by both the microbiome and the food we eat. And epigenetic influences are transgenerational. And regenerative agriculture bridges the gap between soil health and human health and is a positive and viable alternative for nearly all farmers. And there are, which is primarily what we were talking about in this talk, but there are also numerous environmental benefits that we did not discuss. All right, and so these are my references. And that concludes the talk. Thank you.